Hey there everybody. In today's episode of D&D Horror Stories, we have a tale of a player that takes in-game romance a little too seriously. A story of what happens when Mother Nature decides to be that guy, and much more. But before we get into that, this chart shows that a lot of you watching aren't yet subscribed, so I hope I can earn your subscription today. And to play to your emotions in order to get you to do that, here's a video of Alice getting some pets. Did it work? Anyway, let's get right into these stories. Problem player can't separate in-game relationships from real life. By Reddit user, Outside Question. So this happened quite recently, and I figured I'd share my own horror story. I'm part of a 5e homebrew campaign, and I play with my wife. There are 5 of us, not including the DM, but the only 2 characters relevant to this are my darling wife, who plays an elven wizard, and the problem player, Mark from here on out, who plays a tiefling bard. So, my wife and I have a rule, that we are fine with our characters romancing other characters. We don't want to be the couple who only roleplay romance with one another. This is important because of Mark. His character immediately took a shine to my wife's, and he flirted at her regularly. Now, he flirted with most of us and most of the NPCs, so we didn't think anything of it, and she even flirted back on occasion, poorly as her charisma was abysmal. We'd been playing this campaign for about a year at this point, and in-game, my wife's character and the problem players had started a romance. Nothing intense, but it was clear in-game that they were romantically involved. I didn't care about this at all because it's just a game. Unfortunately, Mark didn't see it this way. My wife and I acted like a normal couple when we went to these games. We were engaged and newly married for most of the campaign, and it was time that we enjoyed. We weren't massive on the public displays of affection, but we'd hold hands, sit next to one another, she'd rest her head on my shoulder, and more stuff like this. Well, one day, Mark pulled me aside and told me that I needed to back off from my wife. I was confused and asked, what did he mean back off? She's my wife, and she instigated most of the physical contact. I apologized if he was uncomfortable and that we'd be more discreet. He then explained that, no, it wasn't that he got uncomfortable seeing public affection. It's just that in here, she wasn't my wife. She was his character's lover. I just looked at him like he had 2 heads. I won't repeat exactly what I said, but I ripped him a new one, and immediately told the DM and my wife what he had said. My wife was furious, and said that he was ridiculous to think that she cared more about an in-game relationship over her in-real-life husband, and the DM wrapped up the session after that. My wife made it clear she wasn't willing to play with Mark anymore, and I agreed. We told the DM that we'd be leaving, though he said Mark had been booted from the group, and that we were welcome to stay. Given the campaign didn't have any overarching storyline, we started a new campaign. The DM was willing to start fresh, so we stayed with the group and started a new campaign. We still enjoy our D&D nights, though they are less common now, and have since revised our rule. In-game romances are fine, but only with sane players. Wow, talk about delusional. Not only could that player not separate the game from reality, but I don't think he had any grasp on any reality. Imagine having the notion, let alone the balls, to walk up to a woman's husband and tell him not to show affection to his wife at the table, because she's your character's love interest. It's a good thing that the DM kicked this player after that, because someone like this could probably get much worse the longer things go on. I mean, this player was like a real-life version of that character Tom Hanks played in that Satanic Panic movie back in the 80s. At least they decided to stay and keep playing after giving that player the boot. I mean, Jesus, talk about creepy. Anyway, let's move on. Problematic DM, or am I overreacting? By Reddit user, Graceful Note. A little bit of context before I begin. I picked up D&D about a year ago and have been playing it online with my friend and his friends from New Zealand. I didn't really read over the beginner's handbook initially, but have been forced to recently. I've played in 2 campaigns, and am currently at the beginning of a new one. Campaign 1. A decent start. It was my first time playing, and I wasn't able to fully look through the handbook before I was thrown into the world. DM assured me that he'd do everything by the book, so I just went with it. Everyone else had already done Session 1, so I was playing catch-up. I was summoned in as a level 1 sorcerer with no idea as to what I was doing. During this time, I had to fight 2 goblins and 4 bandits, and almost had to fight a wolf and a hydra on top of that. The wolf I was able to tame, and the hydra I just snuck by. Note that my DM said I would have fought the hydra, and even gave me the character sheet for it. After that opening, things were decent to say the least. It gave me the opportunity to learn D&D and do some light roleplay, which was nice. There was a problematic player, but I was able to mess with him a bit, so it's alright. However, the campaign never really ended. The DM just stopped it and moved on to something else. I begged him for an answer as to why, and was told I got bored. Campaign 2. The Death Campaign. This campaign started off promising, as it was an investigation campaign with light combat elements, or at least that's what the DM said, before switching it after 1 session, turning it into a gauntlet of non-stop fighting. He had designed every encounter with the intent of killing at least one of the player characters, and he legit told us that right at the beginning, and told us to make new characters in advance. My original character was a fighter bard, but I essentially became a cleric with how much healing I was doing. Even when I did make a cleric, the DM targeted the character and killed it in 1 turn. He eventually got bored of that campaign and wanted to finish up with 1 massive battle. At that point, we were all checked out and left before anything happened. Campaign 3. Problem After Problem. This campaign is fairly new, but has already showed many problems. Before we started this one, the DM had been sending us videos of how we can be better players. While I thought it was a little insulting, I decided to take them to heart and work them in. The DM wanted us to be better with roleplay. However, every roleplay encounter was rushed, or he spoke over everyone. He wanted us to describe how we do an attack, but got mad when we did so. He even wanted us to speak completely in character 100% of the time. But the dungeon he gave us exposed just how unfair he is. He brought an NPC along to observe us as we fought. The NPC did nothing as we struggled to kill the army of skeletons that the DM threw at us. Later, we were given a puzzle, and while trying to solve it, the DM lectured us about talking out of character. We didn't listen and just completed the puzzle, and eventually made it to the treasure room. In the treasure room, we had to fight a suit of armor that would make us go prone after every attack. No big deal, right? Except for the fact that the DM took our entire action if we chose to get up. No bonus, no attack, no moving, just standing up. The DM's NPC eventually stepped in and one-shot the armor, and while me and a friend desperately healed our friends, the NPC just took the majority of the loot and walked away. He left us with 20 silver and a few magic items. I've tried to talk to the DM about his behavior, but he isn't having it. I would leave, but I don't have anyone else to play with that's in my time zone. Am I overreacting? Or is this just the experience? No, this isn't what the experience is supposed to be like. And no, I don't think you're overreacting. This DM represents the saying, no D&D is better than bad D&D. The fact that he threw you into an area with a Hydra by yourself as a level 1 sorcerer and stated that he intended you to face it just shows that he either doesn't really know what he's doing as a DM or was just trying to kill your character right off the bat. And I would say that the latter is evident with the next campaign basically being a killing field for the DM. Then there was the third campaign, where he made just standing up from prone take all of your movement, action, and bonus action, only to have his special DMPC come in and save the day. It seems like when he runs games, it's his game, and all of you are just side characters. I know it sucks that you don't currently have anyone else around you to play D&D with, but trust me, wasting your time with this DM isn't doing you any favors. Maybe talk with the other players and see if one of them would like to try their hand at DMing, or even give it a shot yourself. If not that, there is always online play. but I do understand that it isn't the same as sitting around a table. Just know that at least you have some options. Just don't go back to this one. But that's just my opinion. Let's move on to the next one. The Cat Shithouse by Reddit user Rivet Geek. A buddy of mine wanted to start a Jovian Chronicles game, but I couldn't find enough local players. I put out an ad on some website or another. This was like 2002 to 2003, and I got a response. A group of 3 people looking for a game about 30 minutes away. We met them for coffee, and they seemed alright. It was a husband and wife and their friend, appropriately nerdy, and no red flags. They didn't have transportation, so we agreed to play at their place. We made it clear that my friend was chronically asthmatic, as in on a lung donor list. As an aside, he succumbed to his asthma and passed away a few years later. They said they had cats, but they would clean before we played and contain the cats. We decided that we'd give it a shot. He had a portable breathing machine just in case, and he did alright around his parents' pets. Flash forward to the first game. We arrive, and the place smells like cat shit. It wasn't very clean either. They apologized and said that they hadn't been able to clean very well because one of them had been sick, but was better. They assured us that they had changed the cat boxes, but one of the cats must have just used one. Windows get opened, and Febreze gets sprayed. Remember, I said my friend was asthmatic. We play through the first session, and things go mostly okay. The friend is a little weird, and the husband is coughing up a storm, but they promise that they'll clean up better next time. On the way home, my friend and I talk. He said he was willing to give it another try, despite their complete lack of concern for his condition. I point out that if the husband was sick or the place wasn't clean, they should have just called off the game, and that I would tell them that. Once I got home, I emailed them. My friend is asthmatic. If someone is sick, call off the game. If they can't clean beforehand, call off the game. Febreze makes things worse. And they responded positively. We go back a couple weeks later, and the place is cleaner, but it still smells like cat shit. After playing for a bit, my friend suddenly got up, went to the door, and motioned for me to come outside. I excused myself, figuring he had something character-related to tell me. "There's cat shit everywhere," he says. I respond with, "What?" "I got my shoe and some of it under the table," he says as he lifts up his shoe to show me the bottom. "Go back in and look." Once we went back inside, I took a discreet look around, and sure enough, there are cat crap landmines scattered about, near the walls or the corners. They weren't all new either. I asked to use the bathroom. I noticed that the shit smell was more pungent in the hallway leading to the bathroom, and sure enough, I found cat shit in the bathroom. Some had even been smeared on the wall and poorly cleaned. At least I hoped it was cat shit. I came back and apologized, saying I had gotten a call from home and needed to go. That night, I sent the couple an email saying that we wouldn't be continuing the game. Well, that is unsanitary to say the least. First of all, condolences. I recently discovered how hard it is to lose a friend, and it really sucks. But for you to tell these people that your friend had these conditions, and they didn't even bother to clean or cancel the game, just shows that they don't really care about much of anything. Hell, you'd think that the embarrassment of the state of how they lived would be enough to try to play anywhere else, or at least kick themselves into gear to at least make it somewhat livable. Not only is that disgusting for anyone living in that home, but it's also unhealthy for people and for the cats. I love cats, as I'm sure everyone watching can tell, and they are great pets. But if you want to have cats, or any pet for that matter, they require upkeep. By the descriptions of that house, I can't see how anyone could live like that. For cat poop to be all over the house, it just tells me that the couple were too lazy to clean the litter boxes every day, and it's just overloading with waste, and the cats don't want to use them. Honestly, if you can't properly take care of a pet, don't get one. Stories like these really piss me off. But before we move on to the last story of the day, if you're enjoying the video, all I ask is that you give it a like, as it helps let YouTube know to push it more out into the algorithm so more people can see it. And in another attempt to play to your emotions to get you to, here is a Mega Simba close-up. Thanks, Simba. Now, let's get into it. Game became too immersive for our tastes. By Reddit user, Killer Masenko. Hey y'all. So, a bit of background. I was in my early teens when this happened, and tabletop RPGs as a whole, roughly 1 year before the events of the story. Nerd culture isn't really prevalent where I'm from, Albania, so the only people I could really try this whole tabletop RPG thing with were friends of mine, who were also equally nerdy, or at least the Eastern European version of it. But this was a plus for me, because that would mean that they would at the very least understand how dice work, and how it is essentially a real-life version of RPGs. With that in mind, let's jump to September 21st, 2019. It was my friend's birthday, and due to this sudden interest in D&D, he decided to order the D&D starter set a few weeks prior to sort of get it as a birthday present. It included the basic rules, the Lost Mines of Phandelver adventure, one of each dice, and a few character sheets. It wasn't much, but at the time, we were glad that we even had the appropriate dice. For his birthday, we all gathered up at his house on the 9th floor to play. I was chosen to be the DM because I was the one that had the most knowledge of the game, so I decided to spice things up a little. Before this, we played semi-occasionally on Discord, and I already ran Lost Mines of Phandelver, and the players thought of it to be too basic and beginner level, despite the fact that they were beginners. So I decided to homebrew a campaign. The only thing we used from the starter set were the dice. We made our sheets on D&D Beyond because at this point, we didn't know how to make characters manually. One of the players noticed in the item section that there was a laser pistol and added it to his character, called his character Roger Moore, and stated that he would speak with a Moore impersonation in character. Me, being too happy to play D&D IRL, just allowed it, and decided to turn the campaign into a near-future sci-fi setting, with the characters being spies hired by the government. As we started the campaign, the characters had a few spies, reskinned cultists, that were escorting a truck. Inside the truck, I started describing a weird machine that started humming. It was supposed to be a time machine, but I can't seem to remember what the hell I planned for the campaign to turn into. Maybe a far future sci-fi with characters that are from the past. We may never know. As I begin describing the humming and rumbling of this machine, we felt a slight rumble at the birthday boy's house. Stunned, I stopped describing the scene, but a few moments later, start making a joke about how that rumbling was in fact the machine. But unfortunately, I was cut off mid-joke by what would be one of the strongest earthquakes in Albanian history. Walls began to vibrate, glass frames fell out of shelves, and in a panic, we and the birthday boy's family all huddled near a doorway to protect ourselves from this tectonic onslaught, which felt like a bad dream at the moment due to the shock. After it seemed to calm down, we ran downstairs to go outside and sort of recollect ourselves and process what was happening. We decided to hold off on D&D for now. Nowadays, I've become a better DM, but unfortunately, the Earth doesn't help me with my descriptions anymore. Yeah, that is what I call a bit too immersive. I read a lot of stories on this channel where games are halted due to that guys and murder hobos, but I never thought that I would read one where the Earth itself was what ended the game. Thankfully, it sounds like everyone there was alright. If you have a story that you would like to be shared on the channel, be sure to submit it to the dndDdoge subreddit, or even contact me on Twitter. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may all of your rolls be natural 20s. Until next time.